Discord. Okay, so that narrowing down, instead of just the whole world of reparations, we want to look at violence and how that may very well speak to what some people think about Black people in general, and what, you know, the question of what is due. So what he said, the killer said, here's your reparations.
It was
So,
written on his gun specifically. It wasn't like a
written,
verbal quote.
no, it was written on his gun. And so that's
Right.
what we used in our image. And so anyway.
I think that this is very clearly a entire focus shift as to what the conversation is about, which is a good thing because it needs to shift to keep people engaged and to keep people caring. This is what people care about. It has a tangential relation to reparations, like in a very aesthetic way, I guess, just based off of the, you know, ironic reference of it on the murderer's weapon. But it is changing the focus of the conversation entirely to being about mass violence and stuff like that.
So Charles, what do you think? Is this, you see, because when you look at what happened after slavery, we went right to Jim Crow, and you don't see a marker, a timeline in the timeline where we ever said, this has to stop. We're going to now change, because we went from Jim Crow to legal segregation. And then even when you try to eliminate legal segregation, they still did redlining, and all the way up to, I mean, healthcare. You know, we're just not seeing an end to the violence.
Right. No, I agree with Pharaoh. I think it represents a necessary pivot.
Well, you both need to turn up your microphone so I can hear you better. Pharaoh, can you turn yours up?
Maybe we'll see.
Well, maybe it's my. Okay, maybe
probably is yours.
Okay, I have turned up mine.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I think it represents, you know, I agree with Pharaoh, a necessary pivot with regards to just changing the conversation that needs to take place. I think reparations definitely has its place. It's something that, of course, it needs to happen. But, you know, as we move towards discussing, you know, these wrinkles in time with regards to the shootings, which have, you know, continue to take place at the hands of angry young white men, in reference to that, yes, and police, yes, and police with regards to airing out their grievances, misguided, of course, with regards to having an issue with Black people in this country. And, you know, I'll point to something that you said, Diane, earlier. You know, as Black people continue to struggle to find our way here in America, not to quote you directly, which is fascinating, because we were here since its inception. There is no America without the blood, sweat, and tears of Black folks building this country. So for
nothing recognizable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's very, very little was built in the ways of the 13 colonies before, especially in the South, before, you know, Black people, obviously. Yeah, there's something, but not very much. Nothing recognizable as to what you'd consider America as is recognized.
So this, I think this is a really important point. Let's go on to Facebook Live so we can get all that. So people are ready. So are you ready?
Oh,
I mean, Jordana's not here yet, but if she comes, you know, I know she's also working. So if she can come, she will, but we're not going to stop. Okay, Pharaoh, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Charles, you ready? Okay, here we go. Live on, and I actually practiced this to make sure I could go on to the Let's Talk About Race page. Okay, here we go. And I'm writing in. Okay. Select the group. Okay, here we go. Okay. So I may have to cut the, we'll see. So okay, so here we all are. We're on Facebook Live. And I'm also gonna check on the Zoom. Okay,
It looks like we're recording as well. Yep.
you're all set. So we're recording, and we're on Facebook also. Okay, I just pulled myself back into Zoom because I can't look at Facebook because of the time whole thing. It'll work though. So welcome everybody. We are the Racial Justice Collaborative, and we are here on our group page. Let's talk about race, ending white supremacy. And so today, Diane Wong, me, Pharaoh Saunders, Charles Minton, and maybe we'll be joined by Jordana Hart. But we're going to go ahead and get started. We were having an interesting discussion about the connection between reparations and violence, and what's going on, and how are we connecting those two things. So would either one of you like to continue the discussion or recap the discussion maybe? Here comes Jordana. Okay.
Yeah, we can continue the discussion.
Okay.
So, I mean, as I was saying before, I think that the correlation is tangential. I think that the specific case in which we're talking about, how it was an ironic message written on the murderer's weapon, it highlights a violent and hateful response to that concept specifically. But I think that to examine larger trends of violence against Black people, that it is likely important to not want to explicitly tether that to conversations of reparation, because that's unduly limiting, in my opinion. But in this particular case, you can see, and it is relevant in this circumstance, that it's clearly a murderously violent and clearly hateful reaction to not necessarily that concept, but that concept is the specific quote that it is referenced in the weapon.
So why do you think, so anybody could answer this. Hi, Jordana, welcome.
Hi.
Hey, Jordana. Good to
Hey,
see you.
Charles. Hi, Pharaoh.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
We just got started, so, but we are live on Facebook. So what do you think? So Pharaoh thinks it's tangentially related to reparations, violence. And what do the rest of you think?
Are you asking, just because I just joined, are you asking about the link between this idea of reparations to the descendants of enslaved people to the current violence?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
and specifically, I think Pharaoh was talking about because it was referenced on the gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's your reparations. So, but do you see what do you see about the whole history of the reparations and the effort of Black people to become fully part of this country? What do you see about violence in that?
Violence, based on my
Yes.
review of history, is a through line from the beginning to right now. Violence is not just the gun, it's the way children are treated in school, the way families are treated in looking for homes, the way they're treated in banks, trying to get mortgages. All of that is violence to me. And I link everything to reparations and the need for reparations. And the fact that that guy had it written on his gun tells you that he was aware, I think, of the reparations movement, and probably apart from many other insane things. I won't say insane, he's a white guy, so it's not a mental health issue. That he was aware of reparations, and it infuriated him. And I think it infuriates a lot of, if I'll speak about white people, it infuriates a lot of white people, even the silent majority. If you look at comments, and you've all seen these, are like, I didn't own slaves, and I had to work for what I have, all those comments that completely miss the point of the need for reparations.
So I think that these are definitely all interesting points, and I would be inclined to agree that they are the wider scope of what could be considered violence, and all of those historical trends from, obviously the foundations of this country and well before that, would be good reason for why the greater conversation about reparations might be or have merit, is what I'm trying to say. But I think that if this was an attack in response to some sort of progress in the greater political activities towards trying to achieve reparations, then I think that that would be a more direct through line, because it's not like now more than, I don't know, 10 years ago, we're significantly closer to achieving government mandated reparations to African Americans. We're not.
We're not, but what we are, when you hear about all this replacement theory and all of this stuff, these guys, these people and white supremacists are merging all of this together, in my view. And so I don't think we can parse out reparations from so-called replacement theory. The fact that the majority of, I forgot which year, the majority of babies born were babies of color. I'm not necessarily saying African American, but babies who are not considered white.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this is on the radar of that guy, and lots of people. I mean, there's different levels of white anxiety going on, some of it murderous and some of it just, very well, it's white rage. It's what Dr. Carol Anderson calls white rage. It's a white reaction in very different kinds of reactions to what's actual or perceived so-called advancement. I say so-called because I hate this idea that somehow, there's even a reaction to Black people doing well or doing better, but that is what it is, in my view.
It's funny, Diane, I'm still stuck on what you just mentioned a few minutes ago. You just said it just in jest, in terms of like Black folks continuing to find our place here in this country. I need Black folks to really take awareness of the fact that this is our country. That white killer who acted out of rage felt empowered because he understood that this is my country, and I'm quote unquote fighting for my rights in this country. And I think Black folks in particular, I think we need to move out of this victimhood mentality in terms of just being so reactive to things and only acting when things happen to us. So when things are taken away, then we act. Going a few years ago when Trump was saying certain things, all right, we protested and we reacted. When George Floyd and all these things sort of happened, then we react, as opposed to what I think we need to start doing, being more proactive with regards to understanding, yes, this is our country, and then moving forward in terms of acting more powerful, feeling more self-empowered with regards to making moves in this country to really stake our claim with regards to the things that we need done in this country. To me, it's not a matter of just asking for reparations. You can't ask for something that belongs to us. It belongs to us. So why are we always in a place for asking for something that's ours? It belongs to us. It's our birthright. So therefore, once we start moving beyond asking for something and to start moving towards understanding of accepting what's rightfully ours, I think as a people, Black, white, or wherever, we'll be in a better place moving forward.
But okay, let me ask you a question. So, okay, I'm going to follow what you just said, and now I'm empowered. I know that this belongs to me, this country belongs to me. that there's a debt that my ancestors paid, the debt hasn't been paid yet. And so I demand that. But what exactly is my demand? The issue that I have is that it's a power dynamic, and it's who, if we're talking about money, who has control of the money? Who has control of the resources? And this country can belong to us, but we don't own any of it. We don't have the resources, so we can demand, but what is that going to get us? And what kind of demand can we make that makes a difference?
Well, I think, you know, we sort of had this conversation, I think last week or maybe a week and a half ago, you know, refer back to the book Power versus Force. And I think a lot of our movements, particularly Black folks and of course folks who are part of the struggle, quote unquote, has been really forceful in terms of, you know, we've had protests and you know, we've tried to elicit certain things, and we have HR 40 and all these different things, you know, with regards to trying to, you know, make amends and, you know, quote unquote, do the right thing. But it has been really powerful, to your point, Diane, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the currency, we don't have in totality the ownership needed to really move powerful with regards to making these demands. So I think at the heart of it, it starts with gaining more ownership of things and really making a move towards understanding the power of the dollar and understanding that, you know, we have to begin to own certain things and move beyond asking for folks and looking for a white savior, looking for saviors outside of ourselves to do the work for us, and looking inward and growing as a group towards making things happen separately from asking other folks to do it for us. I think that's at the heart of it.
Well, Charles, that is a concept, but now let's break that down. Be specific. Because I look and I say, okay, we have the right and we can demand, but I think what puts people off is that they don't see a way. There's no path. I can demand, I can get 10 other people behind me and we can all demand. And we don't believe, or we don't see how that demand is going to turn into cash in hand. So without cash in hand, without the ability to, I can't say, okay, I think we should have reparations. So I'm going to now let's have reparations, and we're going to send reparations out to the descendants of American slavery. And I can just say that, but it doesn't send out a dime.
Yeah, but what I understand Charles to say is the start, and you go back to the 50s and the days of segregation, which oddly enough created a lot of businesses and kept money in Black communities. And my understanding of what Charles is saying is that's from the groundswell of that. You look at, you know, Black Wall Street. Right. If people start, like Charles said, keeping money in the community, not only do you own businesses, but other people, Black people and other people, even white people, focus on spending money in those businesses and growing them. That's already something. It's not reparations, but it's a growth of power. The States is all about money, capitalism. It's the you know, the most brutal capitalistic society on earth, in my view. But if that's where you guys live and that's what's happening, then you got to join that and do it in the most ethical way you can. But that keeps money in the community. Yes. And Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I understood it. What you
absolutely
said.
Absolutely. I know, Pharaoh, you're going to say something again.
I completely agree.
Okay, so now what I hear is that we're saying the idea of reparations is that the United States government owes, and we're placing a demand. But you're not saying that, Charles. I don't think you're saying we take away the demand, we keep that out there. But at the same time, now you're shifting to say, let's look at our own, where do we have power? And the power that we have is we have individual power, we need to have collective power, but we also have to see the power of what we have and start. So that's that's now putting the responsibility on Black people to take care of ourselves.
Yes, but it also, the empowerment that I'm talking about is everyone feeling empowered in terms of not so much being in a position of just asking for something, but having the means to sort of create amongst ourselves, Black and white together. And I think the powers that be, I don't know if we're going to, delve into that, but it's big business keeping folks separate. It's big business keeping the polarities going, Black versus white, rich versus poor. It's good for business. The slavery thing, I think it goes beyond sort of a Black thing. Of course, that's a component of it, but I think ultimately it comes down to money. Follow the money, baby. That's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about.
And
with regards to right.
Right.
So I think what we're seeing is, the chickens coming home to roost, as Malcolm X said, pretty much with regards to this is capitalism run amok. In terms of, yes, it is about money, but I think ultimately we're losing our soul as for the chase of money. And I think because we've lost our soul, we sort of, the empowerment aspect, and I know it's a matter of saying it, but I think saying it and also putting in the avenues and putting in the sort of the structural guidelines to really begin to feel empowered and do empowering things, I think it's two totally different things. I think saying it is one aspect, but I think the belief comes from actually putting things to action, really putting truth to power with regards to making things work. And that hasn't been up until this point. Yep.
And I don't think it's either or. I think what Charles is saying is one thing to amass power in the American version of power, and also, but also keeping government and large corporations that benefited from the slave trade and after. And we've looked at specific entities. We've used the names of multinationals in the US that have a direct link to the Atlantic slave trade and through insurance, banking, shipping, et cetera. And those companies have to have their feet to the fire, which in some cases they have, and the government has to be involved in that. But so I think it's all of it happening together, but shoring up capitalistic power in the hands of Black people and Black communities and Black business.
Well, I think Charles is saying broader than that. He is talking about shoring up capitalistic power, but one of the interesting things that you said, Charles, and what I agree with, that has a likelihood of potentially working, and because you said not just Black people, but
right.
people who want to become that want to become powerful and able to what? Well, what do you see?
To really, propel this life, liberty, pursuit of happiness motto that was sort of the creed in terms of why this country was created. But of course, we know this country was not created for Black folks. It was unfortunately, we were used as pawns with regard to the creation of this country. 3/5 of a person, we all know that, we all know the rhetoric. But I do think, to your point, Black folks can't make this move separate from white folks because Black folks didn't create this country separate from white folks, and vice versa. I think true change has to occur with all parties involved, and I think once we move beyond, Blacks, thinking that this movement has to be just a groundswell of support amongst Black people and white people need to stay up to the side. I completely disagree with that. I think this has to be done in unison with everyone to really affect change moving forward.
Yeah, I think the economic process that you described is the most important thing, and that can't be undersold, how important it is to be able to have the infrastructure in place to have products be bought from Black people by Black people, because that is how, I mean, I'm not an economist, obviously, that's outside of my field, but I can understand that is just how it works. If you just give Black people a lump sum of money, here are your reparations, have a good time. Obviously, people spend that however they will, and a lot of it could be spent towards, individual investment towards those individual people's futures. But if you spend your money that is yours, is given to you, or your money because you work for it, whatever it is, however you end up with money, if you spend it on European brands or white owned brands in the United States or American brands, whatever, anything like that, you spend it on Asian brands and on this, that is where the money goes. That's their money now. That's just what money is. It was your paper, now it's theirs. So, that doesn't keep things in communities. And when communities are economically, I don't want to say economically planned, because that has certain implications. But when communities are thought of for how they'll be not self-sufficient, because it's not like Chinatowns or Greek towns or whatever are actually financially independent, but have a level of security and a degree of at least slight separation where they can maintain certain things on a community level. That's because they own their own stores and you buy things there, and therefore their money, or that money, becomes their money.
But
And
see,
that's what has to happen.
I hear a difference still, and so I want to illuminate that difference and see and look at that, because what Jordana said and what Pharaoh said has to do with Black communities building own resources and then having these piles of money or keeping it within the community. What I hear Charles say is that he's broadened it out. He's not talking about, at least I'm not hearing Black communities working together with Black.
No, to Jana's point, no, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're together. I think they're working in tandem. I think Black folks doing what we need to do in terms of having the empowerment aspects with regards to our community, and then broadening it to make sure that everyone, pretty much everyone is aligned, I would think. Well, most people are aligned in terms of destroying white supremacy. And I think getting like-minded individuals, right.
Sorry.
Right. So pretty much once Black folks have that sort of come to Jesus moment, and I think that's a separate of another day. I think from there, I think we can also combine forces with like-minded individuals and then take it a step further in terms of destroying the seeds of racism across this world. But I think it has to start specifically within the Black community, becoming more self-empowered and not looking for a white savior outside of ourselves to do the work for us.
Okay. Right. Jordana, did you have something?
Well, no, I just wanted to add that, there are people, apart from the work that Charles has described being done, the creation of business products and services within a Black community, or the Black people spending there, other people can roll their money into that and support it and grow it. And I'm not suggesting, I don't consider that reparations at all. I just think it's a decision to be made on where we as white or Asian, Latinx, spend our money too.
Okay, so what you're all saying is that, and that's where Charles talks about power as opposed to the force of marching or the force of demanding, the power of feeling, because it's acknowledging kind of a mental thing, but it's also getting a feeling that we have power, and then through that start to collaborate and build up, come up with plans. But he's also saying that at the same time, that was for the Black community, but also at the same time, other communities who want to participate in the whatever it is that we're coming up with can also start to develop around those ideas. I think that is what we need, because ultimately I don't think the power is in separation. I think the power is in seeing this oneness, and so and on top of that, why would we want to build the same thing that's already been the segregation? We don't want to build that, but we do need to feel our power, and not just feel it. We need to do some things that say power and generate power.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I mean, well.
Okay, so what are you saying that you don't mean? Because you said that something, it'd be X and instead we should have Y. So what is the thing that you are saying that we shouldn't have or shouldn't do?
No, I think that what I'm hearing is that the Black people, the acknowledgement of a Black power and a power base is acknowledgement that we have each one of us has X numbers of dollars, and we could put these dollars together and create something. And at the same time, but there's a different thing, which is that the other communities of color and white communities could also be building and moving toward that, bringing together something that is probably not capitalism. Or is it capitalism? Are we still doing capitalism?
So that gets into the extremely abstract if you're just talking about building an entirely new economic system from scratch.
Yeah, yeah. So we're talking, for right now, we're talking about still being within a capitalist system.
I think that is the only way to think about this in a grounded way, or, you know, mixed system, because the American system is a mixed economy.
Right, and then to take that even a step further, I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. So why do we think Black folks have not received reparations up until this point?
I think that the reasons include the high population of Black people, which is to say, or even if we're just saying, okay, so I think it has to do with the level of responsibility that the United States feels it has to its Black population, because even if you were to take it as at face value that people just agree that African Americans should be given something, which many don't, but even if you were just to assume that is, African Americans aren't the only portion that makes up the Black population of the United States. So I would argue that the United States government would say that it has no responsibility to pay reparations to Jamaicans or Nigerians or anything like that, and that they should talk to the UK or France or whatever to figure that stuff out. I would say that the issue of determining which of mixed race people would get reparations is a major issue, stopping reparations from being an easily displayed thing, because there are lots of white passing people that have African American descent can directly trace their ancestry to slaves. They exist, and there's not a small number of them. So that would be a significant stumbling block in terms of the debate of, do they deserve reparations? Should they get this? How would that be determined? Right. And also, even if you are just to have the African American population, that's not a small number of people, you know, comparatively to like other ethnic groups in the United States, especially other ethnic groups that receive financial reparations, like Native Americans, which are a much smaller population.
See, Pharaoh,
those are all complications.
I think there's something else. I don't think any of those are the excuses, but I don't think those are the reasons.
No, those are all reasons too. I think that the other reason that you're implying but not saying is they don't want to do it. And that's why I said at the beginning, just to take it at face value that they want to give African Americans anything, because they don't, and that's what I said at the beginning. But you know, assuming that was the case, those would be the logical reasons as to why they don't. But the other reason, in addition to that, is they don't want to give African Americans stuff.
So why? So Jordana, let me pull you in. Why do you think there has never been any real reparation, even discussion, unlike in other Native Americans? One might say, you know, got certain things. The Japanese, I mean, I don't think there's a reluctance to give people something that we think is owed. But why is there this, not just reluctance, a refusal to even talk directly about reparations in the United States? Because with
with all the reading I've done and the talking to people and listening, I think it's really a DNA level anti-Blackness, number one, whether people want to, that's what I really think it is, because ultimately, and Pharaoh, I hear all the things you brought up, but when you read like the roadmap of Dr. William Darity, for example, and how he talks about, you know, he answers every one of those questions. You know, he agrees, you know, Haitians, Haitian Americans, Nigerian Americans, et cetera, other people of African descent. He's like, no, they're not in play. They need to go to the UK, which by the way, they're doing, as we know, they're suing the UK government, the French, the Dutch. I mean, there's a whole movement going on with the Europeans. So yeah, they're not in the picture. I mean, there's an answer to every one of those issues. And if the US wanted to do it, they could. I mean, and you look at like Canada and other places, you know, Canada's dealing with a huge reparations to the children who attended residential schools. They're giving back millions of acres of land, which they should, giving back the land they took, unceded territory. I mean, if a nation wants to do something, it is going to do it. And I firmly believe that, and the US doesn't want to. And I believe, well, two things, anti-Blackness, but when you look at the scale of the figures and you ratchet up the cost and the different calculations of the labor stolen, even later after that, all the millions and millions of acres of Black-owned agricultural land taken away through fraud, through the, you know, by the US government, basically. There's dealing with that type of lawsuit right now and reparations on that. I mean, when you look at the extent of it, it's so massive that I think they don't even want to face how massive it is. So the anti-Blackness and the scale of what is, it can't ever, yeah, and it can't ever, in fact, you can't even really come up with a number, because the number is what was the cost of the labor, but then look at what happened after and the repercussions intergenerationally through to the present.
Yeah,
It's like, it's
bingo.
It has no, you can't even put a figure on it. And
unquantifiable. It's unquantifiable. There's no way.
That's the word. Thank you, Charles. It's unquantifiable.
And it's unprecedented.
Well,
yes,
it's not something that can be compared to the other examples that
it can't be compared
that
to
were brought up.
It can't be compared also to reparations made for the victims of the Nazi Holocaust. I mean, all of those. I mean, that was a huge. No, that was a huge 11 million people, 6 million or so of them Jews. But you were able to. They were able to wrap their arms around, and they chose to wrap their arms around it.
Yep.
The German government and other European governments.
Yeah, no, it's immense and unprecedented scale, both in terms of damages. If you're thinking about, you know, suing government for what they've done to a group and how they've been wronged, it's unprecedented, and it's also, it would be an unprecedented cost to pay, not just because the damages are immense, but because of the population. You know, because I don't think that can be ignored as just a logistical concern of why the U.S. government would just sort of want to not care about this issue or say that it's an impossible issue to solve, because these are the two always brought up, and they're mathematically not comparable, in my opinion, which are Native Americans and the Japanese after World War II. Because they were like,
correct.
I think
there were like 80,000 Japanese people that were improper, you know, incredibly unfairly interned, obviously, and they were given reparations. So that's 80,000 people. There are like roughly 2 million Native Americans in the United States. There's over 40 million African Americans in the United States. Those are entirely different figures for if you want to talk about how they would be paid. There's way less people in those other examples.
Right, and also what I was going to say is when you look at what happened during Jim Crow and so forth. I mean, literally, you know, Rosewood, you know, communities destroyed, other communities where whites literally moved into the homes that had been owned by Black people who were terrorized by lynching and white mob violence. So those people lost property. And I know I sound like a broken record. I've talked about this before. That home was not inherited by even the descendants of the Black owners. It went to white and enriched the white descendants of whoever just stole that house and moved into it. That is crazy. That is crazy, and that's just ongoing in every, you know, in every aspect of whatever property ownership, whether it's agricultural land, privately owned property. I don't even know how you figure all that out. And then I was thinking, well, maybe that should be at the state level where they start looking at what happened in their state in Florida.
I think that's what California is doing now.
Exactly.
Right?
California is doing that. And so then you at least take those people get repaired, so to speak, or their descendants, while you're still dealing with the huge umbrella of you know, of reparations on a federal scale.
But look at reparations, but then look at looking at reparations. So we have not even decided this discussion that we're having now, how do you determine it? And there's no serious discussion that the United States government has ever undertaken that even starts to look at that. So what? So let me ask a question. Just say that end of slavery, that could have been a time, because they did do reparations for enslavers. They did somewhat some reparations for enslavers. So there could have been something that said, okay, we've got all these Black people that are now free, and they've worked for 300 years, however many hundreds of years in this country, and they need at least something to get started. There was never a decision of that. And the first decision that comes along is Jim Crow. We're going to villainize, we're going to mock, we're going to degrade, we're going to make them unhuman, less human. And so then after that, we'll do it legally. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. We're going to say, you know, Plessy versus Ferguson, we're going to be segregated. So what I'm saying is that it's not just that we haven't done it, it's that everything that has happened has been violent. And again,
counter to reparations.
Counter,
and 40 acres and a mule also didn't happen. So
nothing happened except for more violence, one system of violence after another, after another, after another. So to me, it's not just that because the United States decided they couldn't pay for it. There's this anti-Blackness that we can't let that go.
I think that post the Civil War, like immediately after the Civil War, it was 100% feasible financially for reparations to be given to slaves.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that because we're over a century after that, there's lots of logistical issues that make it difficult to do now. But back then it was 100% possible and completely within the financial capability to do.
But so, okay, so let's decide that. It was feasible to come up and say, this should be done. They did not decide that. Instead, they decided violence, Jim Crow, do everything, segregation, separate but equal, take away, greed, kill and destroy it. And so why is that? What makes African Americans in the image of America, white people and other people?
I mean, those things were primarily pushed and put in place by the people that wanted to keep them slaves. So that shouldn't be any surprise.
No,
all of
but
those things were put in place by Southern white lawmakers.
Well, but Pharaoh, there's always other people beside. There were plenty of people all over the rest of this country. Nobody came.
That doesn't mean anything for Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were local state laws that were ubiquitous throughout the South. But some guy in Connecticut who might have a dissenting opinion, that's irrelevant. That's not how this country works. So white Southern lawmakers were the ones responsible for a lot of the systemic issues that you just described. So Jim Crow laws, the Black Codes, all of those sorts of things were put in place in those places.
But there are a lot of other opportunities and Black people moving out into other places. Nobody has championed African Americans.
And by the way,
besides African Americans, not really.
But when you look up in Chicago, and I mean, it was not a panacea for Black people who migrated north.
No,
we know that.
not.
It might not have been Jim Crow, but there was full segregation, full on violence and assaults. And
a big reason as to why that was in the North was because. Oh, sorry. I was just saying the big reason why that was in the North, especially in factory cities like Philadelphia or Boston or Chicago or anything like that, was because the white working class in those places were it's literally identical talking points as to right now with like immigrants was that the Black people that were formerly slaves in the South are going to move up here and they're going to take all the factory jobs. They'll work for less than us. And then we're all going to lose our jobs. So there was, and that's what caused, and that was a major reason as to why there was so much hatred and backlash from white workers in
They
those
didn't
cities
have
against the
that
black people.
backlash to the Irish and the Italians.
Yeah,
and
they did
everyone else.
originally, but they integrated
Yeah,
over
but
time.
they got over it pretty quickly. So
Because after a generation,
I don't believe anti-blackness is not involved in that
no,
reaction.
No,
but that is
I think,
anti-blackness. No, that's a part. That's a
but
part of
see,
it. That's
but
not.
Pharaoh,
That's not to say that that isn't anti-blackness. Because the reason Italians and Irish and Jews to a lesser extent, but still, that doesn't apply as much to them is because after 1 to 2 generations, they are just white Americans now. Black people will always be black people, no matter how many generations pass. They still look
Correct.
different. So Irish and Italians, they talk different. Their religion might be a little different, but after enough time, we can't tell the difference, and that doesn't apply to black people. So that's a factor of why that plays in anti-blackness, because that's uniquely
Right.
applied to black. Well,
okay,
that's primarily applied to black people.
yeah, but see, what we're not denying, none of us are denying that anti-blackness, right from the beginning and right until now, is at the core of why we don't have any reasonable discussion of reparations, but why we still have violence to black.
Well, I think Diane, anti-blackness is at the core, but I think broader for me, it all ties back to capitalism. To me, it ties because the powers that be, because to have capitalism, you need consumers and you need producers. You know, you need haves and have-nots. So the essence of why I pose the question is because it's not in the interest of America to ever give, particularly, you know, folks in this country who represent the biggest, you know, broadest, you know, consumers in this country, any sort of means of stepping beyond the struggle, stepping beyond this paradigm. That wouldn't be in their best interest to ever do that. So I don't think they ever plan on giving us reparations. I don't think that's ever been in their mindset to ever do that.
But see, okay, so
I think to me it goes beyond just asking, and I think
yeah.
it's been we're in a subservient place by always asking for something, and I think that's at the heart of the issue for Black folks in terms of always asking for something and not holding folks accountable or demanding that we get it. And I think
I don't think the demand right now, I don't think that demand's going anywhere. I think.
Well, can you define demanding before we continue? Because I want to know what that means.
I think demanding is demanding at the very least, America is held accountable for its crimes against humanity. That has never taken place.
But what does demanding mean besides asking?
Who holds America accountable? Who?
Well, I think each and every citizen should do that, number one. But if that's not going to happen, I think Black folks in particular should do that. Well, not in Black. I think everyone should hold this United States government accountable for its crimes against humanity. That has never been taking place. That has never been done. But I think white folks at the very heart, we have to demand that happens, and that's never happened up until.
I mean, reparations were brought up to Congress in the 1880s.
Brought up, but never agreed.
Like, it's not like it didn't happen. Because the American government is not like a monolithic thing. You know, it was killed in Congress, but it wasn't like a secret plot where the people that originally thought of the idea were like, well, we're just going to say this, but we don't actually want it to happen. You know, it's more, I mean, it's possible that who knows what was going through whatever that congressman's head was. But the point is, it had enough dissenters to kill it. And it ended up like thousands of other bills that never make it into becoming laws in the Congress.
But see,
think about HR 40. HR 40 is just even to ask a study of it to be done. It's not even implement. They won't even do that. They won't even back financially a study.
Well, John, that goes to my point. Why aren't they doing it? Because we're not making them do it. That's the point.
Make them
simple,
how?
Very simple.
How does that happen?
You say you're not getting our vote unless you push this forward. Let's start there.
Okay.
Let's start there at the very least.
I agree with
because
that.
When you have this guy Biden saying you're not Black unless you vote for me, what are we talking about? Are Black folks, are we in a better position now that Biden's in office? Of course not. This is not a presidential thing. This is a U.S. government thing. It's beyond whoever's president.
So I don't know if I can agree with that in a pragmatic sense, in a purely pragmatic sense, because I would like to agree with that. I think that it makes a lot of sense. And I think that especially on the local level, it's something that's necessary. But that's not something that you can afford. You can't claim to be pragmatic or work towards what is immediately going to alleviate harm while also having such an all or nothing stance like that. Because though I agree that what President Biden said there in that interview was really stupid, and anyone with sense would have not said that. it is objectively true that it is worse for Black people for Donald Trump to be president in that circumstance.
I think it's
And
negligible.
therefore,
I think it's negligible. I think it's.
I don't think it's negligible.
We're
I think
fucked either
that
way.
I don't think that it's
either way.
negligible. I think that it is. I think that it's tangible. I think
Why?
that it's tangible, and not only in that how it directly affects specifically Black issues, but how it affects the world. Because Black people have our own issues, sure, that we care about and are important to talk about politically. But we're also humans that live on the world, and therefore things that are better for the world's safety, the world's military security, the world not slipping to literal despots that stomp on their own people's necks. That is relevant to Black people in the same way as relevant to everyone. And so therefore, for pragmatism's sake, even though that's a dumb thing to say, and he shouldn't have said that, it is still important.
What are you Pharaoh, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to having a sane president versus an insane one.
No, but you mentioned a quote of Biden.
Oh, when President Biden said that if you're not Black, you don't vote for me.
Oh, okay.
He said it wasn't that. It was something like that. It was equally stupid. But the point is, the point he was making is that obviously it's in Black people's best interest to vote for me. And though I agree that he hasn't done enough for Black people, and that I spiritually, which is to say, I don't know, that's probably not the best way to say it. I would like to say that I shouldn't vote for someone like that because they don't do enough for Black people. The pragmatist in me knows that it is better for all people, including Black people, for us to have him as president versus Donald Trump as president.
I disagree, but here's the question I want to pose. But I don't want to. I think we're sort of, I don't know, we're sort of moving beyond the issue. But here's my question: with everything that has happened to Black folks in this country, can we have a single bill that's passed that sort of directly ties into affecting the lives of Black folks in this country?
Apparently not.
And that's my issue, and that's my point.
And
that's my point. Because when it's happened to other races of folks, immediately bills are passed. Folks they have conversations.
I agree.
Kumbaya.
But see,
with Black folks, nothing gets done.
But that's where I keep going back to the issue of violence, because I don't think it's enough to put all of the problems and response on the government. Yes, the government.
Right.
I think we're looking at what the people of the United States feel about Black people. And I think that we're talking.
But that's a component, because you asked specifically what is one thing we can do. That is one thing we can do, among other things. One thing, holding these politicians accountable for erecting policies which directly affect the lives of their constituents within their communities.
So
that's not being done on a grand scale. That's not done.
I especially agree with that in terms of local elections, which is more, and state level things, which is probably more relevant to what we're talking about anyway, in terms of getting it to actually happen. But like in certain large enough scale things, I just can't in good conscience nor lie right now say that I would do that versus, vote for someone who's more likely to launch a nuke versus not launch a nuke, because that's relevant for everyone, me included, even if the not launch a nuke candidate isn't doing enough for Black issues specifically. But another thing that we can do besides hold politicians accountable through your vote is financially boycott things, which is even more plausible, because you don't need to drink X brand of whatever. You can drink water if you want to. So I think that is something that I think is even more capable of being done.
Well, but okay, then look at what we're talking about now, the things that we can do. Now we look at and we say, okay, what do we see? First of all, a large part of the problem is that out of the potential people who could vote that are Black, we're not voting in any kind of large numbers. So now we're not voting at all. Not voting.
We are. Yes, we are.
I think.
Why do you think Georgia went blue in this last presidential election?
Yeah, but why isn't Georgia all
purely Black people?
Georgia probably
and Black women especially.
Georgia,
even more specifically.
Just look at the numbers of look in South Carolina, look in Georgia, 50% or more of the population, and can't get But
That's
a
because they
small percentage-
actively make it more difficult to vote. I don't want to purely put that on
No,
the
it's
the
gotta be.
sloth of Black people. It's a specific, concentrated legal effort to make it difficult for people to
Yeah,
vote in
but
those
see,
in those states.
difficult is not impossible. And
Sure,
so,
and
and
people
so,
bust in from incredibly long distances to get to inconvenient places to
but,
cast their
but,
votes.
but Pharaoh, there are also large numbers of Black people who do not vote.
Too many. I think one is too many, but yes, too many people don't vote.
So now now we're back at what Charles wants to look at power. Well, then we have to look at Black people, how we spend our money, if we vote, how we vote. And I think, there's a lot of responsibility in the condition that whatever that condition is on Black people. Not just, there is the government's one thing, the white racist society that we're in, the white supremacy, we're swimming in a sea of white supremacy.
So you're saying that more of it should be on Black people?
Oh, I think absolutely that I think that if we're going to do what Charles is talking about, move away from asking and looking at our own power, that comes with it. What are we not doing that we could do that wouldn't be hard?
No, I certainly agree. And I think that Black people, and I'm gonna have to look at more figures to support this, but you are right that there are statistically lots of Black people that don't vote enough, but particularly what they don't vote for is local and state level things, which is more important what we're talking about. So that's the thing that needs to change on that front more than anything, because it's not like Black people, I mean, more than there should be, there are Black people that don't vote in like presidential elections, I guess, but that's not the most important factor for what we're talking about in terms of the actual processes for how these things might legally come about. It's state level things. So on that front, yes, I agree that needs to be, done more by Black people. I mean, but even more than that, it's immediate financial responsibility of it's things that seem small but aren't actually that small. So like buying this brand versus this brand and what that actually means in large enough numbers, that is important. That affects large numbers of things, and that is something that anyone can do.
I agree with that. But now let's look at what Charles is talking about. Demand the power to demand something. Well, in order to, I can go and I can stand on the street corner and I can demand until they come and get me from standing on the street corner demanding. But if I can stand on the street corner and I can demand, and then a lot of other people.
That's it right there.
Say,
yes.
Yes, we
demand, not I, we.
Right.
Yes.
And then pretty soon, if they're just seas of people, and it can be Black people, it can also be white people, it can be all, and they all are coming.
And if enough people say it, they'll be forced to listen. That's my point.
Right. Okay. But then we have to take the first step toward responsibility of getting out there and gathering together those groups of people who are going to do that.
Even before that, I think even, Pharaoh, you mentioned the word spiritual. I think spirituality is a component to it, just in terms of looking inward. Over the past couple of years, I've definitely done more of a spiritual, I don't know, what do you want to call it? To just recognizing who I am as an individual with regards to my spirituality and not putting my power outside of myself. And I think once Black folks, we look beyond, the caricatures and the images which have been placed before us in terms of, well, give your power to this person and this person and that person, all those people happen to be white, that's, neither here nor there. But once we stop doing that and look inward.
Just being a Black person that you give your power to, it's like being a Black police officer.
Not Jesus, not the president, not all these external forces,
right.
Looking inward. And I think once you begin looking inward, by sheer force, you sort of attract like-minded individuals. And then from there, the force will move towards power. But because one person saying, as opposed to most people saying it, I think it'll be much more powerful. Obviously, the more people are saying the same thing.
But now, Charles, you just added another dimension, which is recognizing that we have power, more than the power that we know about. So that's not only joining together to buy things or to make decisions or to come together to demand something. Now we've taken it a step further, which is we have to first recognize our own power. Jordana, let me bring you into this because now we just moved into spirituality. So what do you think?
Oh, yes, and I'm the person to talk about that.
You're the person, absolutely. So no, because I think you have some critique about that. But where are you on that? What do you think?
I have critique about that only in the sense that people, all kinds of people are so inundated with the daily drudgery of living and dealing with their children, and buying food and medicine, and just dealing with all the forces outside, that this idea of, you know, looking inward, and if that involves like meditation or whatever it is, I
whatever that means to you. Yeah. Whatever that means to you.
Right, whatever it means. I don't know how much power or how much one would have to really encourage people to do that and make them believe that that's going to make a change. And especially people who are feel severely disempowered, plus coupled with all those other issues, I'm not sure. I tend to agree with it in theory that it's probably a good thing, but.
Well, see, I agree with it.
And
but
Charles obviously thinks it's a good thing because he has done it. And I know you have too, Diane. I don't know about Pharaoh.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is why what we're talking about.
I mean,
now
do you mean like on the importance of spirituality?
It's just why it's so complicated, because what Jordana just said, I mean, people are trying to like make ends meet, put a roof over the head, put food in the mouths. And so when you start talking about recognizing your own power, they are going to think they don't have time for that.
Well, I think at the heart of it.
Church? What about church? And people go to church. Is that, I mean, what does church do? Does it keep everyone in line with the white supremacist system? Is that what church is doing?
I mean, in some ways it could, but I think that's, I don't think that that's inherent. I think that people will always prioritize certain needs over others because that's just part of being a human being. But people have toiled and struggled throughout the history of humanity for much longer than right now. This is the most luxurious humans have ever lived in the entire history of our species. And throughout most of it, we still had time for spirituality. So I think that the holistic, idealized, and not even just idealized, literally ideal, form of spirituality that we might be referring to here might be difficult to achieve should you be struggling on a physical, immediate needs level. But there's always time for something like that, because since the pyramids were being built, there's always been time for that. And life has been hard for a long time.
Well, I think also all of our beliefs are Eurocentric, right? The praying of Hawaii, the majority of them, unfortunately. And I think spirituality for me is, it could be anyone in particular, but particularly Black folks having a realization that there is something that exists bigger than you, right? There was a reality that existed prior to you. There were individuals who lived on this earth prior to you. Those individuals, perhaps you can call them ancestors or whatever. So it's my personal belief that we are guided by our ancestors. So as Black folks just begin to just look inward, for me, that is an awareness that there is something greater than me. And they are guiding me in the right direction in terms of doing what's best for me and what's best for my people.
But that's what Jordana.
But again, ultimately, it comes down to
that's what church is.
That's what.
But even if you want to make the claim that church doesn't do it enough.
But here's the bigger thing. No one is going to save you. That's ultimately what I want Black folks to realize. I think that totally counter to what Jordana. The church is not saying that. The church is saying Jesus.
is going to save you.
That's my point. That's my point. So again, everything is external. So what I need Black folks to begin to realize specifically, there is nothing external that's going to save you from putting food on the table. There's no amount of blame. There's no sort of circumstance you could, point to outside of yourself and what you can do to help your situation. So once you are cognizant and aware of that the power is within and sort of affect the lives of your family and who you are, then you can, begin to branch outward. But if you're not looking inward, affecting what you can do within your circle of influence, it doesn't matter what you look outside of yourself in terms of helping the world. You can't help yourself first.
So I agree with that. I agree with that. I don't think that we were talking about churches, so I'll use that for an example. I don't think that that's mutually exclusive with Christianity. I used this example last time we had this discussion, though Jordana wasn't here. So, I can't remember the name of the show, but it was a show, and there were two priests talking to each other. And one was talking about the importance of submitting and allowing Christ to save you in all ends and endeavors. And the other priest was talking about how his belief was that God gave people the will and the ideas to do great things, such as the knowledge and the wisdom to create vaccines or space travel were the specific examples that he used. And they're both priests, obviously they're both Christian, but there's just different ways of viewing theology, viewing it actively versus submissively. And I think that it is always ideal to have an active mindset in all forms of life, including spirituality and theology.
See, I think Charles is saying something different, because those are still, well, no. So we've got.
I don't think they are different. That's my point.
Okay, so Charles, what do you think?
No, I agree with Pharaoh. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but going back to our original, point of like self-empowerment, I think that's at the heart of moving forward within the racial justice collaborative as individuals within the diaspora in general, folks gaining a semblance of self-empowerment, feeling empowered, because unfortunately, the evil people will feel empowered to do the wrong thing. So we need something to combat that evil. And I think that starts internally with representing, this is your country. You were here since its inception. Take ownership of it, and to affect the lives of individually who you are and, within your purview, whatever you could do within, whatever you can see with your two eyes. And then from there, you can look towards helping the world. But first, that starts from within.
Charles, I think what I think is needed there are real specifics, because I can feel really empowered and I can know that I have the power inside of myself, but that hasn't changed. There's no money in anybody's reparations, not going to happen, because I say I've been here since the beginning and my people have been here and we need it. So there's some, or nothing to do with need. I just think that it's got to be.
Well, again, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think just the aspect of knowledge, knowledge is power. I think it sounds, whatever, kind of cliche, but I think true knowledge of who you are, I think helps. And begin to feed them in terms of, critical, race theory, whatever you want to call it, just understanding that, the curriculum or the things that we've been taught, for the most part have been incorrect. So I think that there are tangible things that we can start doing as people to sort of circumvent and sort of move beyond this ideal of white supremacy, but at the heart of it is knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, I think that's, I think something else is going to have to happen. Because I don't think there are any of us that are, there's a big step, even the step in getting people, like Jordana was talking about earlier, if you're worried about your rent and your food and all those things, then to tell people, okay, instead of thinking about those things, try to clear your mind and meditate.
Well, who said that? I don't think anybody said that.
How are you going to get, what kind of power are you going to get that doesn't require you to feel into yourself and receive that?
Well, I think recognizing that, no one is going to save you, and to begin to look for whatever means within your community, which is within your preview, to make your life better is a start. And reaching out to individuals who can help you within your circumstances is a start. But looking inward first, looking within things that you can do specifically, not blaming anyone else, specifically what can you do to make your life better before you blame someone else? I think that's at the heart of what can be done.
But Charles, so I have a question, and I'm not a Christian, but
I'm not
There was
either, by the way.
somebody famous who said,
Nobody
that religion is the opium of the masses, and there's a reason, which is that it just used to calm people down, keep them in line,
I agree
make
with
them
that.
think there's an afterlife, that
Right.
your life is terrible, there's something to look forward to. I mean, and many people believe that. And so what you're saying is, when you say to make sure Black people, or to try and have Black people get to the point where they can say, no one is coming to save me. I mean,
Right.
that's a huge leap, not only for Black people, but for lots of
Right.
people who are religious and see religion in that specific way. It's,
Well, I think at the heart of that, yeah, go ahead. No,
I'm saying
I was
I
gonna say at the
totally
heart.
see what you're saying, but wow,
I think,
that's a big
I
ask.
think folks pretty much, well, I'm not going to really, I don't have to worry about my life because the afterlife is going to be better. And I think we have been stuck in this paradigm of looking outside of our life for heaven or things getting better. No, it can be better right now. Like, what can we do specifically right now at this time to make our lives better? It doesn't have to be in the afterlife. And I think,
I
John, to
agree
your point,
with you.
yeah, I think
I
that's
agree
at
with
the
that.
heart of our issues. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you, but now from where we are right now.
But John, to your point, John, it's a huge leap. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I'm
Well, I
clearly aware
mean,
of that.
but see, there have to be some things that can happen overnight, that we have to really identify those things.
Well, Dan, why does it have to happen overnight though? I don't think.
Because
don't think it
because
does.
in the long great scheme of things, if we don't get busy doing some of the things that we can do right now, I think that there are a lot of things on the horizon. What Pharaoh was
Well, you
talking
talk separate things. Like you talk about the beginning of the journey and the end of the journey, two different things. I think you can start doing something, but the end result is the end result. I'm pretty much focused on the process rather than the actual end result. I think folks get
No,
muddled in.
well,
This is too hard, so let's not start. So I think folks get too lost in that, as opposed to just starting something, doing something.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's what we're
that, well,
talking about.
it's that something that because if we're going to take our awareness and our belief away from somebody that's going to come in and save us, that's going to be a hard sell. So
I have to look at their lives. Tell me, is it working for you? That's how I framed it. That's how I framed my life. That's pretty much how I was able to make the change with me. But
So let's wrap this up. How do we want to? Let's wrap this up. So Charles, let me ask you to wrap this up. Give us some suggestions right now that we could do in our own locale. What can we do? What might be things we could do right now?
Right. Well, I mentioned this earlier, maybe our last conversation. Rakim, one of the greatest hip hop artists of all time, said, "Know the ledge." Know the ledge, meaning knowledge, which is breaking it down. Know the ledge, knowledge. So pretty much the impetus behind him saying that was, once you gain knowledge, you sort of, you put yourself on the ledge towards self-empowerment, towards being the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. So ultimately, that's sort of been my mission as an educator, working with schools and working with kids all around this country in terms of how can you be the best version of yourself you can be? What tools can I give to principals and to teachers and to students to make you the best versions of yourself, to empower yourself? And I think that's at the heart of what individuals can do in terms of having that knowledge of self, begin to just have sort of like a knowledge that, yes, the power is in me. I can do this even if it's a smaller scale for myself. And then from there, going online and seeing there's like-minded racial justice collaborative being one of them, individuals who sort of share that like mind in terms of affecting change within your community. It just has to start within your community. It's not about changing the world per se.
It's not even
change your community.
It's not even that. It's because what you're talking about, first people have to change within themselves.
Right.
So I want to put a marker on this, a flag on this discussion, because we're also looking at, for the Racial Justice Collaborative, who are we and what are we going to do? So maybe for the next year, Charles, we can do some more of self-empowerment. What exactly does that mean? What can we do in an education? Are we doing education? I don't know. But what can we do that helps?
But even on a smaller scale, so right, sorry to cut you off. There was a baseball, the Dodgers coach. No, excuse me, San Francisco Giants. I guess he has a lot of issues with regards to like the way the country is going, and pretty much within his purview, he decided, you know what, I'm not going to go out when the national anthem is being said within the stadium. So as a coach, within this circle of influence, said, you know what, as a white man, as the national anthem is being said, I'm going to sit out in the dugout. I'm not going to come out while the national anthem is being said.
Okay.
So on a smaller scale, that was within the circle of influence. He did something.
I see
that. It's not huge, it's not large, but it's something like, within the circle of influence.
That's like Colin Kaepernick and what he did. He took a stand and he held on, and it became a whole big picture. Okay, so we'll come back again, people, Facebook Live. Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles, Pharaoh, Jordana. And this is not the end of this discussion. How can we make things better without waiting for somebody to give you something, but also expecting to receive because it's owed? So both, not either or.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Peace, guys. Later.
Okay. So I'll stop the recording.